The Henschel 129 was a World War II ground attack aircraft of the German Luftwaffe. The aircraft saw combat in North Africa and on the Eastern Front. It was anticipated that the main source of damage to such an aircraft would be small arms fire from the ground, meaning that the plane had to be well armored around its cockpit and engines. Similar protection was also needed in the canopy in the form of a 75 mm thick armored glass. The aircraft was expected to be attacking in low-level runs, so the cockpit had to be located as close as possible to the nose in order to maximize the visibility of the targets. This aircraft entered service in early 1942 with the Schlachtgeschwader or Ground Attack Wing 1. The Henschel 129 aircraft were in the 4th and the 8th Squadron of the wing. The P and Z abbreviation stands for Panzerjägerstaffel or Anti-Tank Squadron. These two anti-tank squadrons were formerly part of the Ground Attack Wing 1, but they operated independently. They were very often placed under the direct command of an air corps or even an air fleet. In the middle of May of 1942, they received a new weapon, the 30 mm Mk101 cannon with armor-piercing ammunition in a centerline pod. Although accurate and powerful with a high muzzle velocity, the cannon was very heavy, which limited its production. Fed by a 10-round or later a 30-round box magazine, the Mk101 could penetrate 75 mm of armor at 300 meters range. When it was used from beneath an Henschel 129's central fuselage as a pod-mounted anti-tank weapon, the Mk101's tungsten-cored AP round was capable of penetrating the turret or the side armor of the Soviet KV-1 and 2 heavy tanks. When developing Operation Citadel in the spring of 1943, it was planned to strengthen both the fighter and assault units of the Luftwaffe. The composition of each anti-tank squadron was increased from 12 to 16 aircraft. The Battle of Kursk began on the morning of the 5th of July at dawn. German tanks and infantry went on the offensive after artillery and airstrikes. They were supported by large aviation forces as well. In the absence of suitable targets, the Henschels basically flew free hunt missions. The 129s operated on the southern sector of the Kursk from an airfield located about 20 kilometers northwest of Kharkov. The pilots carried out missions in formations of 4 aircraft against the Soviet tanks. They flew more to get acquainted with the area than to help the ground forces. Recalling this initial period of the Battle of Kursk, Captain Bruno Meyer, who that time held the post of head of the anti-tank operations, later wrote, "Our work in supporting an advanced regiments was just a pleasure." Later, Henschel supported fruitless attacks in the southern sector of the offensive until the 15th of July. On this date, all the tank hunting squadrons were ordered to the Ural sector because of a Soviet counteroffensive. Operation Kutuzov was the first of the two counteroffensives launched by the Red Army as part of the Kursk strategic offensive. It commenced on the 12th of July 1943 against the German Army Group Center. The Germans had spread their forces thin all across the front in an effort to provide as much men and material as possible for Operation Citadel. Holding the front before the Soviet offensive were the 2nd Panzer Army and elements of Model's 9th Army. The region had been held by German forces for nearly 2 years, and despite Hitler's order not to build defensive works behind the front, some preparations had been made. Operation Kutuzov's main objective was to cut Model's 9th Army, encircle and annihilate it completely. In doing so, they hoped to cause a general collapse of the German forces in the Soviet Union. The attack was to begin once the German panzer units engaged in Operation Citadel were locked into combat and weakened by their offensive at Kursk. On the 19th of July, Schlachtgeschwader 1 played a vital role as the Henschels of the Luftwaffe alone prevented a Soviet breakthrough. The Soviet tanks had already severed the 9th Army's lines of supply when all Luftwaffe ground attack units were ordered to the Ural sector. The Soviet 1st Tank Corps arrived on the evening of the 18th of July, and the Soviet 70th Tank Brigade severed the rail line. Later in that day, by chance, Captain Bruno Meyer of the Tank Hunting Squadron crash-landed near the marsh in the vicinity. He noticed a large force of approximately 80 Soviet tanks expertly covered in camouflage. Using his aircraft's still workable radio, he transmitted his position. Major Georg Dörfel, commanding the 1st group of the ground attack wing, picked up the message and led his unit against the 70th Soviet Armored Brigade. Other air units were vectored to the site as well. After 15 minutes, 16 attack aircraft from the 4th Squadron approached the battlefield, followed by aircraft of 3 other anti-tank squadrons. The Henschels hung over the battlefield continuously. One squadron attacked, the 2nd returned to the base, the 3rd replenished fuel and ammunition, and the 4th at that time was en route to the point of the attack. The Henschel aircraft strikes against tanks were accompanied by fighter raids of fighters equipped with SD-2 fragmentation bombs, a very effective anti-personnel weapon. The Henschels tried to attack the tanks from the stern or sides, where the armor was thinner than in the frontal part. In less than an hour, most of the tanks were rendered inoperable. The Luftwaffe claimed 135 tanks, 66 totally destroyed. The Soviet official history acknowledged the decisive intervention of the Luftwaffe and remarked that the 1st Tank Corps only had 33 tanks remaining by the following morning. A few days after this battle, General Walter Model, the commander of the 9th German Army, wrote a letter of appreciation to the Luftflotte HQ. He wrote that for the first time in history of the war, the Luftwaffe, without any ground support, succeeded in halting and destroying a complete armored brigade and saved my army. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss my future work, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel and press the bell notification button. Thank you, and see you in the next video.